Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode, we want to talk about Internet of Things and an overview of the devices of Internet of Things in Packet Tracer. So in Packet Tracer, in addition to the ability to add routers and switches and endpoints, we also have the ability to add things. And these things are divided into two subcategories. One is the smart things and one is the components. The smart things can be connected to home gateways using the normal network connections that we have, like wireless or RJ45 connection or Ethernet connections. And components can be connected to microcontrollers using specialized connections such as serial or parallel or these type of connections. And they have digital and analog slots. For smart things, we have a few subcategories, which is home subcategory. If we can come here in devices, then we have the home category, the smart city category, the industrial category, and the power grid category. And for components, as we said before, we have microcontrollers or boards. These are basically the controllers. We have sensors. These are the components that can sense the environment. And they have the ability to give us the data about the environment. We also have actuators, which I have forgot to written in here. Actuators. This is also part of components. It is a subcategory of components, actuators. And actuators allow us to manipulate the environment in some way or another. And as you can see, we have a lot of actuators available in Packet Tracer. We also have the subcategory of boards, which is basically single boarded computers and a special device called thing, which we can create customized things with this device. That's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative, and I would like to see you in the next episodes where we would go into more details of Internet of Things. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode, we want to talk about interacting with smart things. So basically, there is many ways to interact with a thing, and the way that you can find out with each thing, because it's different from one thing to another, is to go to the specification tab of that item, that thing, and you will be able to see how to control and interact with that thing. Here I have, for this street light, I have the ways that I can control it. There is the direct control. Well, that is not applicable. There's the local control. That's not applicable. There's the remote control, and that is also not applicable. So basically, these ways are not applicable for the light that I have in here, but it is applicable for the other things that we have here in Packet Tracer. So now you know that we have three ways to interact with a thing. The first way is direct control. So if I press the Alt key in my keyboard, and now that I have the Alt key, I can use my mouse to interact with this thing. As you can see, I am interacting with this thing, and I'm turning it off and on. Another way to interact with a thing is through local control, and by local control we mean that interacting with the object by the use of the digital and analog slots that is available on that thing. Now you can see that this object is connected locally to this microcontroller, and this microcontroller is connected to this switch. And if I turn on and turn off using Alt, I have Alt pressed on my keyboard, and now when I'm interacting with this switch, this switching is causing this object to turn off and on. And this is the local way of controlling an object. The remote control of way of an object is through interaction over an IP network, and that is usually through the means of a registration server or a home gateway. So here I have my server. This server has registered this item, and if I try to access that server using my PC, which I will go to the web browser here, enter the address of the server, which is 1.1.1.1, the username and password. Now, as you can see, this IoT object is registered with the server, and I have the ability to control it remotely through this server. Now you can see when I turn it off and on, the object also turns on and off. And that's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative for you, and I hope to see you in the next episodes where we go into more details of IoT objects. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode we want to talk about cabling things. So let's get started. If we want to connect two IoT components to each other, for example, I have an MCU board and I have a switch in here, and I want to connect these two items, these two objects together, what I can use is that I can use this IoT custom cable. When I click here in the MCU, it brings me the list of the slots, the list of the interfaces that it has. For example, it has the digital slots, digital 0, digital 1, and there's analog slots also available as well. I'm using the digital slot because this switch supports the digital slot and the digital slot to digital slot. They are connected to each other now, and now we have a local connection between these two objects. Please remember that the IoT custom cable is a bundle of wires which the detail is actually inaccessible to the users, but it provides all the ground, power and data connections necessary for the communication between things. And also remember that currently the model does not let us unwrap the IoT custom cable and create circuit schematics. That's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative for you, and I would like to see you in the next episodes where we go into more details of IoT. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode we want to talk about IoE registration server and how we can connect an IoE server through a smart thing. So let's get started. For this connection to happen, first I would need a switch to make the wired connection between the server and the smart thing that I want to use. The smart thing that I want to use is a lamp. So basically I will put the lamp here, and now I want to make the connections, straight through connections from server to the switch, and another connection from this item to the switch. As you can see, this item, this smart thing, doesn't have a fast Ethernet port, so let's go and see the configs. As you can see here, it has a wireless interface, but it does not have a wire interface. So let's go and change that. I go to the specification tab, then I go to advanced. Now here I go to the IO config, and in the network adapter, instead of the wireless one, I will choose a fast Ethernet connection, fast Ethernet interface. Now I have a fast Ethernet interface on this smart thing. The next step is to create the connection. Now I have created my connection to the thing. Now let's go and configure the IP addresses for each of these devices. For the server, I want to use 192.168.1.1. For this device, for this lamp, I want to use 192.168.1.10. And we will have a intermediary PC where we will do the controlling and of course use the server to control the device. So for this device I will use an IP address of 192.168.1.5. Now let's go and configure the IP addresses. For the server, I have to configure the IP address on the fast Ethernet port 192.168.1.1 and the subnet mask. Now I will copy this and I will go to this device. On the fast Ethernet connection, I will use 1.10 with the default subnet mask, and for the PC I will do the same. 0.5 with a default subnet mask. The next step is to enable the IOE registration server for this server. So let's go to the server, to the services tab, and here we go to the IoT and we will enable this service. Now let's close it. Now I want to register this smart thing to the server. Let's do that. But before we can do that, we have to go to the PC where we access the server and create a user account and password, which will be needed later on. So we go to the PC, to the web server, to the web browser, and now we have the web browser. We want to browse the IP address of the server 192.168.1.1. As you can see, the registration server login page is here, but I don't have an account, so I will sign up for an account. The username is admin, the password is admin. I will create the account. Now I am logged into this account, but there is no devices available. Now we need to register this lamp to the server. Let's go to the lamp. Now here in the config tab of this smart device, I want to introduce this device to the IoT server, which is a remote server at this address 192.168.1.1. The username and password is the one that we created, admin. And now I'm connecting it to that server. Let's see if it can connect. Yes, it can connect. It has already connected. We can see that. Now let's minimize this and go to the PC. Refresh this page. There was no need to refresh. The device has already appeared here and it's already registered to this IoT server. You can see the status of the device and a few controls that I have over this device. So let me show you. Now currently it's off. I can make it dim or I can make it fully on. You can see the status of the device can be changed remotely by this PC because this device is registered to this server for remote control. That's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative for you, and I would like to see you in the next episodes. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode, we want to talk about the 3 pages in the IOE registration server. The first one is Home, Conditions, and Editor. The home page allows us to monitor and also manually control the things remotely. Each thing has a list of states. For example, for this thing, it is only a state of on and off. And each state can be of the type of Boolean, of the type of number, string, or image. Except for the image, the other types of states can be remotely controlled from the IOE registration server. The next tab that we have is the Conditions tab. Here in the Conditions tab, it allows us to configure things to react to certain conditions from other things, and each rule has a list of conditions and a list of actions. So let's see, for example, we can create a rule, we can give it a name, test. There's a set of conditions to be met, and we can control that, and then there's a set of actions to be met, and we can set and control that as well. And at the end, we come here and save this. So the editor page allows us to edit programming objects and deploy them on things. The programming projects are saved on the IOE registration server under the user account. By selecting a project's name and start running that project on a thing, we can see the output from that thing here in this panel, and the thing would be running or executing the project. That's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative for you, and I would like to see you in the next episode. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode, we want to talk about modifying existing things. So basically, in Packet Tracer, all things, including smart things and also components, use the same base device, which is a thing. It's located under components, under boards, and the thing. What makes this thing very special is these three tabs: IO config tab, the thing editor tab, and the programming tab. The pre-packaged or pre-existing things that we have in Packet Tracer, they're not editable by default. You have very limited configuration for them under config tab, and they're not editable by default. But if you want to edit them, you need to go to advanced here, and now the other tabs appear for this thing, and using these other tabs you will be able to edit this pre-existing thing. That's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative for you, and I would like to see you in the next episode. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode, we want to talk about creating things, and specifically we want to create a traffic light today. So whenever we want to create a thing from scratch, we can use this object, which is under the components, under the boards, and this generic thing. First, we want to rename it to traffic light so that we know what is it about. And now we want to open and start editing it. The first thing that we want to do is to go to the IO config tab, because I want to tell you a few things here about the IO config tab. You know that things communicate with other things through IO or input output, and based on that we have a few options in here. This thing can have network adapters. We have a few options for network adapters. For example, we have wireless options, and also we have wired Ethernet options as well. We can have digital slots for this thing, up to 6 digital slots that is allowed. We can have analog slots, up to 4 analog slots, and for USB ports we can have up to 1 USB port that is allowed. And also remember that for smart devices, if we define this thing as a smart device, then there will be the physical and the config tab. But if we define it as a component, there is no physical tab, there's only the other tabs. Now we want our traffic light to be smart, so I will choose this as a smart device. Now let's go to the thing editor. We have the properties tab, we have the layout tab, and we have the rules tab. In the properties tab, we are going to add the components that are going to make up our traffic light. The first component that I want to add is the base of the traffic light. I will name this component as base. We do not need a slot mapping for this component, because there will be no changes to the base of the traffic light. But I do need a picture of the base of the traffic light for this component, but no slot mapping. We will add the next component, which is the red light of this traffic light. We do need a slot mapping for this red light. The slot mapping, I will use slot number 1, and we will need 2 pictures for this red component, which is the red color, and also the off state. So basically, because this component will have 2 states, which is on and off, that's why I have added 2 pictures for this component. The next component that we want to have is the yellow part. It will use the same digital mapping slot, which is number 1, and we will add yellow, and we will add the off state. The next component we want to add is green. It will use the same digital slot mapping, and we will add the pictures for the green part of the traffic light. Now we want to go to the Layout tab, where we have the opportunity to organize all the components and their places and their proper places and set their default states. Let me separate all the components because they are located in here. They're all on top of each other. I have separated them. Now I want to put them in their proper places. Red in here, yellow in here, and green in here. And we know that each of these components, they have two states. Now I can cycle between these two states. You can see the off and on state, and each one of them can be cycled. And basically, if something is not correct in here, something is behind something else, then you can always use these two options to bring items back and front. But for us, everything is good, so I will leave it the way it is. Now the Rules tab will actually define when to swap the image of the components based on the slot mapping, the value of the slot mapping. For the base component of the traffic light, I do not need to have a rule because it will not change, but for the other subcomponents, for the green, red and yellow, I need to have rules. For red, if the state is low, it means it's off. The image will be in off state. And again, we will add another one for red. If the value of the slot will be high, that means that the red light is on, and that's why we have selected the on state of the image. And the same way we will add the rest of the components. Now we are done with the rules, but remember that the slot, because we have used digital slot, it has two states of low and high, because digital components, they have two states all the time. But if we wanted to have more states, then we could have used analog slots. Now let's go to the Programming tab of this thing, where the main functionality of this thing is going to happen. Now programming is the logic that makes the traffic light functional, and the traffic light will loop through different states of on and on at the same time. And the traffic light will continuously turn on and off its lights, and all of that logic will be created here in the programming part of this thing. Here I have a project already created which is called Blink. Now I will open it. Now I will go to this JavaScript file, and instead of this code I will paste my own code. As you can see here in this code, that it has a loop function which will continuously turn on and off the lights of the traffic light. I will paste this code for you in the description of this video so you can use it for your own as well. Now let's run our code to see if it has actually started to work. Let me move this traffic light to a proper place. Here I have my traffic light and I want to run the traffic light for the first time. Let's run it. And as you can see, the traffic light is blinking, turning on and off all of its lights. Just like any other device, we want to save our traffic light as a custom template of a device. Now we can come here, custom devices dialog. In here I can find my device, or I can select it. Now the traffic light, I will call it my own traffic light. I will save it in the miscellaneous subcategory here in the packet tracer, and now I can add it. It will ask me for a template file to be saved. I will just save it as default. And now as you can see, we have our traffic light in here to be used later on whenever we want to, and we can create many instances of the same device over and over again. That's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative for you, and I would like to see you in the next episode. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to this episode of Packet Tracer. In this episode, I want to introduce you to different type of programming APIs that we can use for IoT devices. So let's open one of these devices. As you can see here, here I am in the programming tab, and now I can create a new project. My project can be based on 3 different programming languages, which is JavaScript, Python, and the visual programming. Now the APIs for these 3 type of programming is available in here in the help menu, in the contents, and this web page will appear for me. Now in this web page, if I go to Internet of Things, I have the API for JavaScript, Python, and the visual APIs, and a lot of details is available for you here so that you can use in your program and do your programming. That's it for this episode, everyone. I hope this has been informative for you, and I would like to see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.